representing the Creation Temple, and I'm here today with the gorgeous Bella. And she's actually someone who has been through human trafficking, sex trafficking, and she is a lived life expert. And I'm really excited to have her with me because, as you guys know, I am passionate about disclosing some of the things that have been happening behind the scenes and that people just aren't talking about. And I think these conversations are very important. So I'm so grateful to Bella for showing up to share with us her experience and how we can change this and make this world a better place. So Bella, why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you've been through, wherever you want to start. You've been through quite the journey.
Yes, Susie, thank you so much for having me. And again, I want to thank your audience for just having a listening ear and being able to allow themselves to engage in this dialogue. I do just point of correction. I survived labor trafficking at a very young age. So I want this to be used as an opportunity to learn about trafficking, the realm of trafficking, the different factors that contribute to trafficking, and basically what we all can do, right, to continue this conversation on both combating trafficking, providing services for victims of trafficking, and how we can engage in the conversation to understand and see the ever-changing nature of trafficking. So, if you don't have any, it's a lot. That's a lot, and I don't know if we're going to cover all of it today, but I think that we're off to a good start. Yeah. So, Susie, I just want to say that when people think about trafficking, we think it's a phenomenon that occurs elsewhere, over there, not here, not in our backyards, not in our schools. It's something that's, third country. It's something that's, we usually associate it, with a specific image. And that's not true, right? That is a misrepresentation of what human trafficking is. So just for terminologies, usually when I speak on trafficking, I'm usually speaking to an audience that already passed the human trafficking 101. So we get into specifics. So I'm trying to I'm trying to make sure that I go back to the basis. So whenever a person, it can be a child, it could be an adult, it can be women, it could be men. Basically, in the realm of trafficking, we say that human trafficking does not discriminate. What do we mean by that? I've worked with victims who are, and survivors, depending on what they call themselves, who are American, who are white, who are Black, who are poor, who are rich. So human trafficking does not discriminate. So when we are having a conversation on who is the potential victim of human trafficking, we need to keep in mind that, Susie, I met women like yourself who look good, who are being trafficked. Yeah. Or who are being trafficked. So those are, I just want to get certain terminologies in place before we continue. And so so for those of you who are listening, who might not know what trafficking is, so there are various forms of trafficking. There's labor trafficking, where people are being exploited, children are being exploited for goods. And then there's also trafficking, where people are being exploited and being used to produce sex for money. And it usually takes place under force, fraud, or coercion. So that is the nature of trafficking. Is that
like no one volunteers for this. No one signs up for this.
No. I don't think I have met one victim in my life that said, you know what, I woke up and I felt good and I was like, let me just get into let me become a victim, right? Right. Nobody chooses a life of exploitation. Right. So
to clarify, sex trafficking, for example, would be different than prostitution because prostitutes often volunteer themselves. Is that how we would see it?
Yes. Okay. So traffickers use force, fraud, or coercion to lure their victims and force them into labor or commercial sexual exploitation. They often typically look for people who are, I want to say, have vulnerabilities. It can be economic hardship, it could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be natural disasters, it could be political instability, it could be so many things. So that's what traffickers use. They try to find vulnerability wherever systems they can find,
Mm-hmm.
and prey on that vulnerability. And they use that. There are three components that we have to keep in mind when it comes to trafficking. And this is important because, I'll share my story with you briefly after this. This is important because we need to recognize that it involves them inflicting fear through force, through fraud, and through coercion, so that the victims can perform something related to labor, or commercial sexual exploitation. And the base here, right? The commonality here is for money, for some kind of financial gain.
Right.
So those things that I wanted to clear up. And myself, right? If you were to meet me, Susie, if I would say, if before I told you my story, if I asked one of your people, your followers, to say, hey, you know what, describe me. You don't know me, but if I say describe me, you would describe the outside, what you see on the outside, right? We all do that. But if I'm telling you that today I am an abolitionist, I am an educator, I'm an author. I sit on a U.S. Advisory Council for Human Trafficking, and we're all appointed by the president. So when I talk about all that, right, and then I say, and I'm also a trafficking survivor, people are often shocked by that. They often wonder what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually I will say something like, I'm standing here in front of you as all these titles, right, that we'd like to, use to describe people or see them of some kind of value.
Yeah.
But if you turn the page, the other side, I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. Meaning, if you would have met me, I want to say 7, 8 years ago, I wasn't all these titles, but I'm still human, right? I'm still human. So I'm originally from West Africa, Togo. I was about 9 years old when I was trafficked into the United States by a family member. So I want us to we don't have a lot of time. It's going to go by really fast. But there are certain variables that I'm mentioning, that I'm international. I'm from somewhere else, right? I'm not a native of America. Meaning I'm somewhere else. I'm from somewhere else. I was a minor. I was 9 years old, and I was trafficked by a family member. So my story is not insignificant to many, many trafficking survivors. You will see that, just like me, a lot of survivors are either, the sensualization of how you hear trafficking story. The van pulls up, kidnaps everybody, and they force them into something. That is not typical, right? If we view the data from the Department of State's Human Trafficking, OTIP's website, we will see that most trafficking victims are trafficked by somebody they know.
Can I interrupt you real quick, and
Yes,
can you tell us that website again for people who
yes,
want to look at the data?
yes, yes. It's called OTIP. If you just
Okay.
go onto Google,
Okay.
and you type in OTIP, Office
Okay.
on Trafficking in Persons, that
Okay.
will be the easiest way to assess the data.
Okay. Perfect.
Office on Trafficking in Persons, OTIP,
Okay.
OTIP. And if you look up that data, you will see that most people, both domestic victims and international victims, were trafficked by somebody they know, which was my case. I was about 9 years old when my aunt promised me a better life, better education. And this is a woman who I've known literally up to that point my entire life. This is 10-year-old Bella.
You trusted her. She was a good person in your life as far as you knew.
She was the one who introduced me to Christ. I'm a Christian. She was the one who introduced me to Christ, the body of Christ, what it means to have the gospel, to live the gospel, to be the gospel. She baptized me. So this is a person that I've known literally my entire life. So there was no hesitation when she said, I would like to bring Bella, my niece, to the United States, to her to continue education. And so I left my parents to reside with her. Everything was fine. And I started noticing certain behaviors. But 9-year-old me, I don't think I care much. I was 9 years old.
Right.
My parents visited me. It was fine. It was about 3 hours from my parents. And suddenly, I received the passport. She said, we're ready to go to the United States. We left. 8 other girls traveled with us. And we got to Newark, New Jersey. Now, I mentioned that I'm from West Africa. That means that I had to get on a plane. I had to have a layover in Europe, and I had to come to America, which means that I passed two continents in order to arrive in America, which means that 3 countries or continents had the opportunity to intercept that trafficking event, right? So I was failed by every level of society. And if you think about it, I'm actually fortunate at now, right? Because a lot of the victims we're seeing, when we're talking about in the terms of international context of human trafficking, they're not flying, they're walking across. So they're being exposed not only to sexual exploitation during their trafficking route, they're exposed to hunger, they're exposed to so much more before they get to a final destination where their traffickers will continue to exploit them. So I arrived in Newark, New Jersey, and I passed customs. Now I don't know. I knew that I came to America. I landed. Everybody was speaking in a language that I didn't understand. I was culturally shocked that I was in a foreign land, new people, and I was excited. And when we passed Homeland Security, customs, right? Homeland Security, as you know, are those federal protective guards that they assess who comes in the country and they determine who goes. And customs, you pass them when you're international. We've all traveled before. And I remember passing the customs, and they were speaking English. At this point I didn't speak English. And they sat us down. They were asking questions of, is this woman your mother? And she said, you need to tell them yes. And so they took her. So this is 7 of us waiting. They took her, and we came and sat down, and the agents, big, tall white men with guns, and they were asking us who, we didn't understand. So they got an interpreter, and they took her, and I think 5 hours later, they allowed all of us to go. And
5 hours?
Yes.
So
yes.
You were separated from your aunt.
Yes.
She brought 7 of you over?
All under 10, yes.
And she instructed and prepared you to tell them lies so that you could get into the country?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So when we arrived at the airport, she said, you're going to pass this entrance. They will keep us for a very long time. If you want to eat and go to sleep, you need to tell them I'm your parent, and then they're going to let you go. Otherwise, you're going to be here for a long time. You're not going to eat. And so 9-year-old me is like, oh, okay. Right. And all of us, we did it. We got out 5 hours later. And this was in Newark, New Jersey. And I remember we passed through McDonald's. We passed through beautiful houses. We passed through kids going to school. And I was like, I can't wait, because that's going to be me soon. And just the beauty of that community. And, it was a beautiful house. And I saw that, like kids going to school, they had a backpack. Some of them were eating pizza as they were walking. And so I already pre-planned my life to be like that. We got into the house. I went downstairs. and I saw that 22 other kids were also there.
Whoa.
And I noticed that they were hungry. I noticed that they were naked. I noticed that the horror, the beauty is this beautiful house, and inside of it was atrocities one after another.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's when I knew something was fundamentally wrong, but I didn't know what it was. I don't think that I learned what human trafficking was until the investigative process, where I had learned that, hey, there's something wrong here. There was something wrong with somebody, an adult, exploiting children. It was so normalized, and it was justified using religion, using culture, using so many things.
How do they justify it using religion?
So one of the things that they used to do was, if you respect your elders, the Bible talks about respecting your parents, respecting your elders, which means listening to them. And I'm from a culture where you don't really object to a lot already. So that transition from culture to religion,
Right.
ways of manipulation was easy.
Right.
And a lot of things on respect, a lot of things on respecting authority. And at 9 years old, I don't know if you remember a lot from when you were 9, Susie. When I was 9 years, I just know that was the point I was instantly forced to grow in that moment, because I think I was so naive up until that point.
Yeah.
Because she was somebody I trusted, so I put certain things past her. She was my comfort. She was my safety. She represented. So that moment, everything I knew was opposite.
And at that age, you should be naive. You should be able to trust your elders.
Right. So that's, and so that's when the horror started. When we, I want to go to specific details, but I also want to maintain some integrity of the girls in the house too. So that's when I noticed that I went upstairs the next day, and I got ready, and then I said, okay, you know what? I remember that the girls were walking, so I went upstairs and I said, I'm ready for school. And I was describing her what I'm going to do, and then she turned around and she said, you need to leave my sight. And I was so confused because she had never talked to me like that before.
This was your aunt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She said, you need to leave my sight. And I was shocked. I didn't really understand how she just changed so much. And then I said, can I call my parents? And she said, no, you may not. And I don't remember my parents' information. I didn't memorize the number, but they had given me a little booklet where they wrote all the numbers, and she had it. My aunt was in possession of it. And so I said, okay, so I try to think of, who do I know? I was trying to think of a number. Every single day, I would try to remember the numbers, and I couldn't. It was impossible. And then I couldn't call my parents to tell them I would arrive safely, to tell them that I'm here. And that was the last time I spoke to my parents. Ever till 2000, till I later. So from 9 years, that's the last time I talked to my parents.
Okay.
And so that's when it started. The physical, emotional, psychological abuse within the realm of human trafficking that I talk about. Using us for money, using us for labor, losing us for sex. That went on for a few years. And at this point, there were 22 of us, and all 22 of us slept in one room. All 22. So you think about 22 people. You do the math. You think that traffickers are focusing on their kids, their victims. Nobody's going to give you the information or resources or tools you need to rescue or release yourself from any sort of exploitation, right? So we didn't eat. And so this is, so for example, we will get up at, 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. Sometimes they require us to bath together. Sometimes they like to watch. And we would, they would load us in the van, And if you're under a certain age, they ran several operations. One of the operations they ran was delivering newspapers in Newark, New Jersey. So at so we're talking about 2005, 2006. So we'll individually go to doors and deliver newspapers to people. And some of us, some of the girls would, they will intentionally fly them out to places like California so they can engage in commercial sexual exploitation. And they also have salons where some of the girls do hair for people. And this is this is what generating income, because traffickers don't have a limit. It doesn't, no amount of money is ever sufficient. No amount of abuse is ever sufficient. So they don't have boundaries, they don't have a limit, which is why we as society we need to talk about these atrocities in every environment, because the more we are engaging in anti-trafficking efforts, the more that they are engaging in ways that they can secure their products, right? And I often talk about how in human trafficking, the demand and the supply is the same format. That's the only, if we think about trafficking in the lens of economics, the supply is people, the demand is people, and that's it, right? So going back, and we did that for years. When we come home, we line up, 22 of us, and we hand our money in. And I was very resistant to the idea, which is why I was severely punished. They have you sit on your knees for 24 hours where you don't eat. If you have to pee, you pee on yourself. If you have to eat, good luck, right? So that went on for a few years. And after a while, you become used to it, which is why the shame and the guilt comes into play. Because after a while, with any victim of crime, after a while, you normalize it. You say, well, maybe I deserve it. Maybe I was a bad child. Maybe there's no escape in your head. So the only way you can accept it, some people some people lose hope and commit suicide, and some of the girls did. Some people try to run away. But one thing that traffickers do is that they create a structure of a diagram. So you have, they're the top, then they train other victims to be against each other. So Susie, let's say you and I wanted to leave. Yeah. We make a plan and say, Susie, tomorrow morning, we don't speak English. We're going to run as far south, because when we're in the car, the van is so dark that we don't know where we actually are. We don't know where, right? We just know that we're in America, we're in Newark, New Jersey, but we don't actually know where our house is located. So let's say, Susie, you and I get up and say, Susie, tomorrow morning, we found a way to talk in the shower, because we're usually not allowed to talk to each other. We say, Susie, we're in the shower, the water is going on, nobody's watching today. So tomorrow morning, this is the time that there's going to be a gap, and we have 5 minutes to find somebody who can understand what we're saying. But then what I don't know is that because you get food, you get clothes, you get beaten less, you have leverage. You don't want to lose that. And you're also unsure of what is out there, right? Yeah. And we talk about the Stockholm syndrome too, where some survivor victims develop an attachment to their abusers or traffickers, right? So a majority of victims that you meet could also have the Stockholm syndrome, where they are attached to their traffickers. So a lot of these girls were attached to their traffickers by means of either they use sex, they use drugs, whatever your need is. They, again, not only do they find vulnerability to recruit you into trafficking, they also find vulnerability when you are being trafficked to keep you in the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So every time you make plans to go, somebody unravel it and discloses it. And then when you're discovered, you're severely punished, right? So after a while, we don't go to hospital. We are isolated from the public, completely isolated. You don't go to the hospital. I don't think from the time I was 9 until I was 15, I don't think I've ever visited a doctor. I didn't go to school. There was not anything that is normal process of development that I was a part of. So this went on for years and years. And then, people ask me, well, why didn't you just leave? And then I said, okay, let's think about it. At that point, I was 9 years old. I didn't speak English. I can't communicate to you what is even happening. I'm hungry, right? So we're talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to find my basic needs right now. And then there's a 98% chance that if I go, I might not make it to the gate. And then the punishment, right, that I will experience not leaving is actually, it will be death is probably a better option, right? So when you come close face to face with your greatest fear is that if I don't make it out, if I come back, the way they're gonna punish me, I would have wished if I was dead, right? So we went through that for a few years, and then actually it's coming up November 25, 2007. Normal process, right? So in this house, she has staff. My aunt has staff. She didn't operate. And I want to leave some time for questions if you do have questions from what I'm telling you. 2005, 7 morning of, we're hearing, like there's a helicopter, there's, it was like government agents. I think there's FBI and also ICE from Homeland Security. They raided the house. And then, and Susie, before I got to that point, it's important for me to note that what they do is every morning we go through a homework process. Before, my name wasn't Bella. My name was Patty Marie, because she changes your name, your identity,
Mm-hmm.
to what she wants to give you.
Mm-hmm.
So we sit, and then she would tell us. So, for example, she would say, your name is no longer Susie. I will call you Blue. You are 18 now. These are your parents. And then we each girls had a set of parents. They had a set of names. Some of them, because they were trafficked a long time ago, before I was even here, they've aged, right? So they are now married, unquote, married, literally married, assign you a white husband. So we get up every day, and they will say, tell me your name, and you have to remember. You don't speak English, but repetition, you have to say your name. So when you ask me, if you, Susie, you see me, little girl in New Jersey, you said, you come to the salon, or I deliver a newspaper for you, and you open the door, and you're like, you look too young. Why are you not in school? I can tell you, my name is such and such. I am this age, and my father and mother is in the car. And they'll open the door. It's like a skit, right? They'll open the door and say, come on. Or they'll say, she's sick today, or she's tired today from school, so I just drag her along to work with me. And I think sometimes they've learned the culture so much that, parents, they have the parent talk. She's sick, she didn't want to go to school, so I just took her along with me. These kids. That kind of manipulation, right? They find a way to kind of just assimilate into whatever like is commonly shared. If you are a parent, you understand that you have to work and you don't have a child care, so that's how they do it. They use that sense of psychological manipulation, even on the public, not just on the victims. So they can find a way to relate to you, to kind of kill your curiosity. So that's what we did. So we wake up and learn our names, learn our parents and everything, go to work. When we come back, we line up and we turn in our money. We together made them almost $6 million. And when I say that traffickers don't have limit, even that is not enough. Even so, they will continually find ways to generate income. And that went on until, going back 2007, that morning where the house was raided, and the agents found us. And even though we weren't compliant, because we didn't see it as a rescue. We thought it was a drill. What if this is not true? What if it's like a part of her sick games? Because she has a lot of games to test your loyalty. And so we said the same thing. My name is such and such. Give them the fake identity. Give them, because if something happens,
Yeah.
But she punishes other girls who try to run away. She does it in front of you, so you know what's going to happen to you.
Right. Right.
So we, at that point, we didn't know we didn't know that the police officers dressed were even agents, right?
So you had
Because
no idea what was happening. You didn't know that you could be rescued at that point. You had,
no,
okay.
because in order for you to know that you can escape, you have to understand there's something wrong. So if you don't understand, I knew there was a problem, but then that doesn't mean the rest of the girls and boys knew there was a problem. You know, the youngest boy was 5.
Mm.
Just because I knew there was a problem, that doesn't mean that there's a consensus among us that is a
Right.
problem, right? That's just why whenever somebody want to run away, somebody's like, where are you going to? They're giving us food. Yes, we're being abused, but we're getting food. Because remember last time we went 5-6 days without food, so where are you gonna go to? How are you gonna get shelter? At least you're being abused, but at least you know who's abusing you. What if somebody else abuses you? So you normalize it, and then there's stages of an acceptance.
There's that saying that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when they came, we didn't know that they were agents, right? Again, force, fraud, or coercion, and we had experienced all three, but in different elements, right? When they found us, girls that were over a certain age, we all, at that point, we then found out that all our documents that we enter here with were obtained illegally. So that meant that my aunt would have had somebody working for her in our home countries in the government. That also meant that we are charged with a crime. And so, when we think about victims of trafficking, there's a pre-trafficking stage, actual trafficking stage, and I think the hardest, Susie, the hardest, which a lot of survivors don't make it past, is post-trafficking. Because here you are, something happened to you. You're being charged with a crime. And the TVPRA, which is a federal guideline policy that was enacted to help define trafficking, to kind of help secure protection for victims and prosecuting the perpetrators. There's still a lot of work to do around that, but so for those interested, you can look up the TVPRA, Trafficking Victims Protection. I might butcher that, but just type in TVPRA, and it's been enacted 3 times to kind of give protection for victims and redefine what trafficking is.
So you were literally charged with a crime as a victim. And that's normal. Every victim goes through that.
So this is back in 2007. So the TVPRA has addressed certain things from that.
Okay.
But now, to this day, victims are still charged with a crime in certain states. And I just think that this idea, this conversation of trafficking should not be a partisan issue. It should not be a nationality issue. It should not be a race issue. We should all agree on one thing, which is that nobody in 21st century should use people for sex, to buy children for sex. We should just agree on that, right? But people are different. So not all states have adopted this idea. And then certain victims are still being charged, Susie. And so when that happened, remember I told you that international, right? So we broke a federal crime by entering here illegally using fraudulent documents. That's a crime, right?
As a 9-year-old. But
yes,
you were
it doesn't
9.
matter. It doesn't matter even if a victim was 15, right? Because some people even buy their own ticket to enter here. So you might that's another form of trafficking. You might post a job and say you're looking for a nanny, and you hire somebody from, let's say, like Switzerland, and said, you know what, I'll pay you $10, and they accept it. If you buy your own ticket, when you come here, I'll reimburse you, because they're desperate. Again, traffickers look for vulnerability. They're desperate. They think they're going to get this awesome job. They come, and then everything changes. So there's so many ways that could play out. In my situation, though, even so, I still got here illegally. The law is clear on that. If you come to the United States without papers, you're and obtain fraudulent, usually fraudulent ways, you committed a federal crime. And so you have to be prosecuted for that. And then, there are charges for prostitution. There are charges for stolen identities. And then there's the criminal charges for other stuff that happens. So another way that I advocate now is to disrupt that victim to offender cycle, because when I was rescued, or when we were found, we actually went to immigration jail, just like a holding cell.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I don't want to minimize that. We were found, we were transported to an immigration jail cell where we were until they get our identities, figure out who we are, what we are, understand that. And I think we were the first federal case with that many people, children, and some of them have become adults, but they were trafficked at much, much younger. So they have endured significant trauma. Some of them came when they were 9. At this point, they were 18 or 20 or even 21 or even 26, right? We were found and we were separated. This is the first time that this is another part of the Stockholm syndrome. Even the girls that told on you as you were trying to escape, we call each other sisters.
Okay.
And this is the first time that these girls I've known, right? This point in my life, I have a shared trauma with them. We were being separated from each other. We knew we were used to being abused together, and now we're going to be separated. That was probably the hardest day of my life. The federal agents came, they took us, they held us in immigration jail for a while, and then we were discharged, and then we were being told that we can't be together because some of us, I think I was 15, and I had to go, we cannot stay with them. And we didn't understand that concept, because that fear of what's after, right? Because I think that when we think about trafficking, we say, oh my God, thank God. Did you see that news today? Those girls were rescued. Those boys are rescued, right? But we need to continue the conversation. What happens to them after that? Because just because you were rescued, that doesn't mean that you don't go back.
Yeah.
Right?
This whole entire conversation, I'm just in awe of your mental clarity, your energetic clarity, like everything you've been through. That really messes with your head. I mean, I'm just in awe of how clear you are.
Yes.
You must have done.
It took a while. I'm not going to lie to you. It took a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I'm 27 now. It took a very long time, right? When we were found, 7 of us out of the 22, so 6 girls and 1 boy, we were under 18. So we were transitioned to a different state. We were transitioned to foster care. We were transitioned to a second opportunity at a chance at life that was supposed to not be one that consisted of abuse, exploitation, all of that. And then the rest of the girls, the 15 girls, were in New Jersey. I think 1 was transferred to somewhere in the DC area. But then you look at the trajectory of their life, and you look at the trajectory of those of us who went to Michigan, and it's significant, Susie. Some of them went right back to the life they knew.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't make it. So they.
You mean they committed suicide?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
So that's what gets me out of bed. That's the reason why I'm even talking to you now. To raise awareness, to mobilize communities, to encourage people that when we read about trafficking, when we talk about trafficking, we have to assign people to it. If you close your eyes and you think about trafficking, you see me, right? You see maybe people might not look like me, same hair, same skin color, whatever. But when I was transitioned to a different state, I had the opportunity to go into foster care. I had opportunity. I say opportunity because I compare it to what I was in, right? Not that foster care was this heaven, and then all my wishes came true. But foster care was not easy, right? So I had a very difficult transition, right? It was like one door of crazy open, closed, and another one opened right back. But then the difference is here is that it was that I did not have internal peace. I did not have, I had to begin my healing, but I didn't even know what healing meant. I didn't even know what justice meant. I just knew that I was 15. I was a freshman in college. I didn't know how to read or write. I went to a school that is predominantly white with people who, their parents came to their soccer games and they worry about Tyler who didn't like them back, and they worry about going to Disney World. And I have to travel to New Jersey once a week to face my trafficker and testify, because I had to testify in order for them to be convicted. And so I was in foster care, trying to go to school, trying to be a teenager, and trying to be part of the judicial process of justice, and having to talk about my experience to a judge, having to describe that, having to find my parents after 5 years, 6 years of disconnecting from them, having to just unfold the layers in my life that didn't make sense. And so I had a lot of war internally, and that was shown in my behavior, in my, like, the way that I just engage with people. And I remember one day I was in juvie, because I went to juvie a lot. I don't want to sit here and say, I look poised, but I wasn't always poised, right?
Fair. Which is fair.
I went to juvie, and then one of the workers was talking to me, and I looked at my life. I was in like a lock cell, and I said, Bella, you decide the rest of your life what you're going to be. You can be angry. You can completely succumb to everything you experience. You can continue to have this nightmare. You can continue to feel the guilt, the shame. You can continue to just be angry. And be mad. You know what it was? I think I told you earlier, I'm a Christian. It was me being upset at God, because at that point I was a devout Christian, and I just couldn't understand why God let this happen so long. I didn't understand why God. Yes. Yeah. I didn't understand why God would allow me to feel so much pain at such a young age. Why God would allow somebody to, because all my view on spirituality was so innocent. I was so young that I didn't understand that, me singing Jesus, love me. Yes, I know, for the Bible tell me so. I didn't understand that life is going to intercept that, and you still need to choose God despite that. I didn't understand. I didn't have the capacity to understand that. Right. So I was mad at God that you say you love me, but yet you let this happen to me over and over and over and over again.
So right? that day you heard that voice, or you told yourself that, do you feel that was God speaking to you saying, hey, Bella, you can choose this?
I was tired. I was tired. And I feel like I was screaming, but nobody was hearing me. I feel like I was being submerged. I feel like I was underwater and somebody was just pressing me down. Yeah. And I just kept going up under. And I felt like I was trying to recuse and save myself, and it wasn't working. It wasn't working. I never really found peace in drinking. So, I don't want to say that I'm not what do you call that? The parented child, like survivor, like the poised survivor. Some people find they use other means to satisfy themselves, to forget their trauma. I didn't partake in drugs or drinking. I tried to burn down one of my foster parents' house to make me feel better. I was not a good child. And I was tired, Susie. I was mentally, emotionally, spiritually drained. And I felt like, there's certain type of brokenness only God fixes. And I'm going to keep saying I'm a Christian, because the ways that I was broken into pieces, only God could have fixed that. Right. And only God continues to fix me, right? It's only by God's will that I'm speaking to you today, because there are so many opportunities for me to give up. But I keep hearing that voice in my head, you're worth it. You are loved. You matter. So I kept hearing that, and I kept turning it off, because I was like, you told me that, but then you let this happen to me. And then one day I was sitting down and I said, God, I'm ready. I think I'm ready. I don't know what this meant, but I'm ready. And that's when I began my healing process. That's when I started going to therapy. That's when I started writing. And I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll take school seriously. Although I don't know how to read, and I'm in a class with a bunch of people who just seem so far from my reality. I'm going to court to talk about exploitation because either I testify or I get deported back to a country I don't know, whose government will probably prosecute me. And so I have these decisions to make, right? And and I said, God, I'm ready. I don't know what my faith is, but I know that this is not my purpose. And I know that if you give me just one more chance, God, if you give me just one more chance at redemption, I will make you proud. And I started taking school seriously. I started reading, and then slowly I started learning how to read. Now, Susie, I speak 5 languages. I went from not knowing how to read and write to speak 5 languages. I went from
And that turning point for you was you were 20? How old were you when
I was
turning point?
well, that's when I was 15.
Oh, okay. You said
Um,
you were a freshman in college, so
no,
that's
no, no, sorry. When I was a freshman in high school, I was 15.
okay.
And then I was in foster care. I absolutely hated my foster mom. She fed me hot dogs. But I was just like, even today, Susie, I still don't like hot dogs because of that, and pickles, um, because of that. But I don't think that the 27-year-old me, I don't think that is that I hated her. I think I just had so much internal work. And I wrote her, I think, a beautiful letter, letting her know that I don't hate her, that I did not need those words, that I just needed to do some healing. But I was a freshman in high school, and that's when I started. I was tired, Susie. I was so tired. I ran away all the time.
Understandably so.
You know, and I knew that God was calling me, but I kept pulling away, and I knew He kept calling me. So I was ready to kind of let go. And I started going to therapy. I started learning languages, and so slowly I feel like I was finding myself in God again. And I wasn't being defined just by my trafficking story. I wasn't being defined because after a while, you tell yourself certain things. You normalize abuse so much that you don't think you're worthy of anything. You just feel dirty. So I started feeling clean again, and
Amazing.
and that's what I did, and that allowed me to start the journey of healing, because I think it's still a journey, right?
It's always a journey.
And that allowed me to start a journey of many blocks. And sometimes I stop and pause. Sometimes I keep going. Sometimes I run. But I'm still on that journey even today. So in the spaces I've been in, people ask me, Bella, what was it for you, and how can victims, kind of like the undertone of that conversation is that how can victims be like you? And then I say, that's because you assume that I'm better now. It just to me, in my experience, it just took God for me. Some victim never reaches that point, right? Some victims accept it, that they just accept it, but then I still believe in God's deliverance, even though it doesn't look published, even though it doesn't speak 5 languages, even though it doesn't have all these titles. I still believe in God's redemption. I still believe in healing. So I do these conversations to kind of let people know that regardless of where you are, regardless of what you do, regardless of what you identify or what political ideology you follow, you have a part, that when you saw a 9-year-old me, you can do things to prevent people being trafficked. Susie,
We'll get into that. And I just want to acknowledge how far you've come and the choice that you've made to choose life, to choose to live, to choose God. And it's a universal story, because if you can come out of what you've come out of, transform your life, turn into an advocate, an abolitionist, anyone can take where they are now and transform themselves. And my community knows this is what I'm about, this deep transformation. So I'm just so honored again to have you here in my virtual studio sharing your story. I'm noticing that time has gone by so fast.
Yes.
So I do want to make sure that we cover a few things, specifically like warning signs that people can look out for. You know, you talked about how this does not discriminate against anyone. And I think, and I'm probably ignorant in this too, uh, what are the warning signs? What do we look for? If our neighbor is sex trafficking or human trafficking, what do we look for? What are those signs?
Um, Thank you, Susie. Like you said, time went by fast. And just to conclude, the ways that you identify, there's no like a monotone way to detect it. It's more like seeing yourself as a student of people, because they can be hidden so well. If you detect it, our conversation shouldn't only be about outreach. How do we detect it? We need to have conversation past that. How do I detect it? How can I be a part of ending that cycle where a victim go back to her trafficking, things like that? But for more practical things, of what people can do, if you are in your community and you see that house, like the one I was being capped on, you just know like this house is beautiful. But then every time I walk past it, I feel a chill. I don't really know this place. And every time there's something that's off about it, say something.
If you
you hear
feel
your
that off feeling,
yes.
to whom do you say something?
So people can call the National Human Trafficking Line, and they can go to always call 911. But if you want to report it continuously, I will say if you call the National Human Trafficking Line, which is 1-888-373-7888, just to say, hey, you know what, I'm noticing something. I've done that so many times, Susie, maybe once a week.
Okay.
I'm noticing something. I don't know what it is, but I just want to report it because I'd rather be safe than sorry. The biggest thing I would say for parents, Susie, I used to work with victims who are children, who are domestic victims. The number one would be for me is the internet. There's a surge of traffickers and they recruit their victims online. If you're a parent, please monitor your children's activity online. Please view those comments of all men or women who are commenting, giving them appraisal of some kind of thing, validation. Please monitor that. There's something wrong there. If you see an Uber driver who you deliver your food and you notice that they've been have a conversation with them, because I think that there's, basically pay attention to your supply chain. And one, understand behaviors online. Two, also human trafficking does not require a movement of people. You can live with your parents and still be trafficked. Traffickers still traffic children who live with their parents. They can meet them outside school. They just need to find vulnerability. Is it that you guys are going through divorce? The victims that I worked with, that was a lot of what their scenarios were. They weren't trafficked in, but maybe the child or whatever adult has this vulnerability. Is it drugs? Is it whatever? They need attention, whatever it is. The traffic is going to. So that doesn't require you to move people. They can be trafficked in your home. So creating that dialogue is important.
What can parents? How can parents talk to their children about this? What can they say to their children? Like, hey, you need to be aware of this, or look for this, or do you know what I'm asking?
I think. No, I'm not a parent, right? But having to work with a lot of victims who are children, I would say, and working in child welfare, I would say, know how to come from a non-judgmental perspective. Like, know how to talk to your child. Because I think sometimes as Christians, we have certain ideologies and we want to say that's wrong, wrong, wrong. But explain why it's wrong. Maybe go to a movie and see. There's a lot of documentary on human trafficking. There's so many resources out there Don't say this is human trafficking. Let them know that talking about sex is okay. Don't be so conservative that you are literally creating vulnerabilities for your child to be easily targeted. So that's another one. I think faith-based communities, pay attention to those in your communities. I will say that a large amount of people post certain things that we kind of use a cover to cover issues in the church. For those of your followers who are Christians, talk about the discomfort. Because if you don't want to talk about human trafficking, then something is wrong with your institution. Something is wrong with your setting. You're not realistic. And if you're optimistic, optimism not rooted in reality is a fantasy. If you're optimistic about Christ, if you're optimistic about changing the world, but your ideas are not rooted in what is going on, then you're living in a fantasy. So you need to change that. You need to talk about that. You need to talk about what trafficking is in your churches, in your sections, wherever you're gathering, saying, what are we doing this month about identifying victims, about providing for victims, about preventing trafficking.
Perfect.
And
Amazing. I want to ask also, what resources are available when children, teenagers, whomever, when they are rescued? What resources are available for healing? You've done an incredible job of healing yourself, but you've also described that some aren't so fortunate to have, access to resources. What can you tell us about that?
So I would say, Susie, it's easier because minors are such a protected population, right? So as a minor, I was in foster care. Therapy was available for me. I just didn't want to participate in therapy.
Sure.
Adults, nobody really is paying attention to your healing process. Yeah. They're more seeing if you're going to be a law-abiding citizen, if you're going to be restored into community and be a productive member of society. So for children victims of trafficking, both men and boys, or the elderly, that's also another significant number too, the elderly being victims of trafficking. We need to start speaking on that. I would say for healing, for first minors, will be allowing for non-traditional ways of healing. For me, it was therapy and my faith. For another minor, it might be art. It might be nature, right? So deviating from a traditional way of healing is important. Well, you are in, like, for instance, I was in foster care, so the only way of healing for me was therapy, which I also like, right? But then for another minor, it might not work. So allowing the person, the child, the adult to heal when they are ready.
Okay.
But allowing for tools to be there. Say, hey, this are here just in case you're ready. We can either talk about it. We can do therapy. We can play, like, whatever healing is to them, right? That's one thing I would have preferred, is somebody say, Bella, traditional way of healing, of you talking to a therapist, is not the only way. There are other ways you can heal, and these are it.
So you don't know of any foundations or anything like that help people who come out of human trafficking?
Susie, that's a really good, I don't think I've ever explored that. The National Trauma Association has a lot of tools. If you want to basically explore healing as a whole, but they don't really talk about specific victims of trafficking, right? Mm-hmm. They just make it accessible for everybody who's, like, dealing with trauma.
I feel like there needs to be some sort of foundation or something to invite those people in and say, hey, we can help.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of on your own when you get out.
Yes. Yes. So Susie, I would say that for you and your audience, I see that you're focused a lot on healing. This is something that, even if you do a video on how recognizing your senses and associating that and specifically targeting it for trafficking victims, that's another way to help. There are just so many ways that individuals can get involved without being directly involved, if that's their preference. But I think that there's a talent in each of us to heal or to contribute to the healing of those people who have faced exploitation.
Bella, I want to thank you so much for making yourself available for this. I really appreciate the way you told your story and pointed out significant aspects of your story, because that will help us as people, for me who has not gone through this experience. I can kind of, if I ever meet someone, I can kind of have an idea of these are some of the things that I can look for or I can support, because you've been very specific about what you've been through. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for showing up today.
Thank you, Susie, for creating a space where I can express my views and maintain my sense of identity, and where you're also encouraging education. It is people like you who made it possible for people like me to be who I am today, to pursue my goals and not be defined by my trafficking past. So I want to commend you for your advocacy, for the way that you're educating people, for doing your part into bringing awareness into this issue.
Thank you. Before we go today, is there anything else you want to share with people? Any resources, any tips, just anything?
There is, you can sign a pledge, so that no child, so that you check every time. So basically holding the government and supply chain responsible, so that you don't use any goods produced by child labor. So if you can, you can go again to the OTIP website that I mentioned to you, and you can take a pledge to say, you know what, I'm taking a pledge to check my supply chain. And they'll do that to you. Every time you purchase, they will direct you only to vendors whose goods are not used or produced by forced labor of children. So that's one thing that I will share with you. And again, thank you all so much for doing your part and making sure that no other life falls short of trafficking.
Thank you again, Bella. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie.